The morning June. Lawson was discharged from rehabilitation. None of her 3 children came to get her. Scott canceled before sunrise because one of his construction crews had an emergency on a commercial site. Amy had a closing she said could not be moved. My husband, Mark, was trapped in a quarterly sales meeting. At 8:12, he called me. "Can you pick Mom up? You work from home anyway." I hated that phrase. I had hated it for years. Still, I said yes. By the time I reached the rehabilitation center outside Traverse City, June had been waiting almost 40 minutes. She sat near the front desk in a navy cardigan, one hand resting on her walker, the other folded over a canvas tote. Her face did not look angry. That somehow made it worse. Everyone in Mark's family had assumed someone else would handle it. That someone was usually me. I helped June into my Subaru, folded her walker into the back, and climbed behind the wheel. Before I could start the engine, she placed a thick manila envelope on my lap. A dark blue logo was printed in the corner. North Shore Development Group. "What is this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside were shoreline measurements, an access road sketch, photographs of several cabins, a preliminary site plan, and a printed email chain. I skimmed the first page. Then I saw my husband's name. Mark Lawson. My stomach tightened. Amy had emailed him a site access form. Beneath it was Mark's reply. "Looks fine to me. Scott has the gate code." I read the line twice. June watched me carefully. "Did you know your husband knew they were surveying Blue Heron?" "No." The answer came too quickly because there was nothing to consider. I had known about Blue Heron for almost 30 years. It was the Lawson family campground, 86 acres of woods, aging cabins, campsites, and lakefront that June and her late husband, Frank, had built their lives around. Mark and his siblings had grown up there. Our children had spent summers there, years earlier. June had placed the property in a family trust. I knew that much. I did not know developers had been walking it. "Caleb called me last week," June said. Caleb Monroe had managed maintenance at Blue Heron for nearly 2 decades. He saw 2 men measuring the shoreline. They photographed cabins, asked about the access road, and wanted to know where the septic system was. Who let them in? "Amy," I looked back at the email. "Did you call her?" "Yes." "What did she say?" "Exploring options." June said the words without changing her expression. "That could mean evaluation." "It could." "You think they're trying to sell?" "I think my children are preparing for something they haven't had the courtesy to discuss with me." That was different. And somehow worse. I reached for my phone. "I'm calling Mark." June put 2 fingers lightly against my wrist. "Not yet." I stared at her. "You want me to keep this from my husband?" "I want one conversation where nobody gets to interrupt me before I finish a sentence." Her voice remained calm, not confused, not frightened, calm. "Where do you want to go?" "Not home." I waited. "Helen Brooks." I knew the name immediately. Helen was June's estate planning attorney. The envelope suddenly felt heavier. "Does Helen know we're coming?" "Yes." "When did you call her?" 3 days ago." I turned toward June. 3 days ago meant before Scott canceled, before Mark called me, before I ever knew North Shore Development Group existed. Whatever June intended to do, I had not planted the idea. She had already made the appointment. I started the car. Before we left the parking lot, my phone rang. "Mark." I looked at June. She nodded. "You can answer." "I thought you said not to call him." "I said don't warn him. That's different." I put him on speaker. "Hey, where are you?" "With your mom." A pause. "Where did you take her?" "Not." "How is she feeling?" "Not." "Did discharge go okay?" I looked through the windshield. "Downtown." "Why?" June gave me one small nod. Helen Brooks's office. Silence. Then Mark asked the question I would remember long after that morning. What did Mom sign? I looked at June. She looked straight ahead, and for the first time in 28 years of marriage, I found myself wondering whether my husband was afraid of losing his mother, or afraid of what she had just decided to do without telling any of us first. Helen Brooks's office occupied the second floor of an old brick building in Traverse City. Nothing about it looked dramatic enough for the morning I was having. There was no marble lobby, only a narrow hallway, framed photographs of northern Michigan, and a coffee machine that hissed every few minutes. Helen opened the door before we knocked. June. She sounded relieved, not surprised. That mattered. She had been expecting us. Once June was seated in the conference room, Helen placed a binder on the table. Before we discuss anything else, she said, you need to understand that Blue Heron was not placed into a trust today. I looked at June. Helen opened the binder. The Lawson Family Living Trust was created 9 years ago. Blue Heron has been titled in that trust since then. For several seconds, I said nothing. That single fact changed everything. There had been no sudden plan created after surgery. No new trust drafted because an 80-year-old woman was frightened, tired, or vulnerable. The structure had existed for nearly a decade. Helen showed me the original terms. June was the acting trustee while she was alive and able to serve. After her, Scott, Mark, and Amy were named successor co-trustees. They were also equal beneficiaries. Equal? I asked. Yes, Helen said. So this is not about cutting anyone out? June shook her head. No. Helen turned to another tab. What June wants to change is governance. Control, June said. I looked between them. The amendment removes Scott, Mark, and Amy as successor co-trustees. My stomach tightened. And replaces them with who? June answered. You. I pushed my chair back. No. June raised one eyebrow. I mean it. I do not want Blue Heron. I do not want a fight over Blue Heron. I do not want control over millions of dollars of family property. You are not being given Blue Heron, Helen said. I looked at her. The trust owns the property. If you serve as successor trustee, you manage it according to the trust terms. You do not own it. And if I refuse? An independent professional fiduciary is named as backup. I turned to June. So I can say no? Of course. That made the request heavier, not lighter. June folded her hands. I am not asking you to take something from my children. Then what are you asking? To protect the decision-making process after I am gone. I looked down at the binder. Because you think they will sell, June surprised me. Maybe they should. I looked up. Blue Heron is not sacred because Frank and I spent our lives there. 3 cabins need major work. The dock is aging. The septic system will need money. None of my children is a campground operator. I am not going to order people from the grave to preserve every rotten board because it once meant something to me. Helen slid a page toward me. The amendment allowed a future sale, but not because one beneficiary demanded it. Before a sale, the trustee would need an independent operational assessment, a professional valuation, and a documented determination that selling served the trust better than continued operation. No single beneficiary could force the decision alone. So you are not trying to keep Blue Heron forever. No. June's expression hardened. I am trying to make sure my children do not decide that my death is the only approval they need. The room went quiet. Helen asked me to step outside. I did. I sat in the hallway for 40 minutes while Helen met June privately. When I was invited back, another staff member was present and a camera stood near the end of the table. Helen explained that she had asked June, more than once, to identify her property, her children, the purpose of the trust, the effect of the amendment, and the consequences of replacing the successor trustees. June had answered consistently. No one had prompted her. No family member had been present while she gave instructions. 2 independent witnesses would observe the signing. Helen also recorded a short video memorandum explaining June's intent in her own words. I felt something in my chest loosen. Whatever happened next, no one could honestly say I had sat beside June telling her what to do. I looked at her. Why me? June studied me. Not yet. That is not an answer. It is the only one you are getting today. On the way out, my phone rang again. Mark, I answered. Are you still with Mom? Yes. Did you leave Helen's office? Yes. A pause. Then, what did she change? I stopped walking. Not what did she sign, what did she change? Mark already knew enough about the trust to understand that June had the power to change who controlled it. And suddenly, I had a new question. How much had my husband known before I ever opened that envelope? 14 years earlier, Frank Lawson's health had begun to fail. There was no single diagnosis that changed everything overnight. There were cardiology appointments, medication changes, physical therapy, insurance forms, rides to the hospital, meals left in labeled containers, and days when he needed someone nearby because standing up had become harder than he wanted to admit. Scott helped with money when bills landed. Amy called and visited when her schedule allowed. Mark came when he could arrange it around work. I came more. At first, not because I was kinder. My accounting office was 15 minutes from the hospital. That was all. Then, convenience became habit, and habit became expectation. I learned which pharmacy closed late. I kept copies of Frank's insurance cards in my purse. I knew which soup he would eat after appointments and which nurse could get him to laugh when he was tired. That same year, my company offered me a promotion that required relocating to Grand Rapids. We had 2 children. Mark traveled. Frank needed help. I said no. A year later, I left corporate accounting and started my bookkeeping business from home. Over time, the Lawson family began describing me as lucky, flexible, available, as if flexibility had arrived as a gift instead of being built from something I had given up. I rarely corrected them. The morning after June met with Helen, she called all 3 of her children to Blue Heron, her meeting, her property, her decision. Scott arrived first. I heard his truck before I saw him. A minute later, he was standing beside the keypad at the entrance, stabbing at the numbers. The gate stayed closed. He called June. Mom, the code doesn't work. I changed it. Why? June stood on the porch with one hand on her walker. Because it's my gate. Scott stared at her. This is family property. June's expression changed. And I'm still family. That was the first time I understood that access could look like love until someone stopped granting it automatically. Amy arrived next, then Mark. Inside the lodge, June placed the developer packet on the table. Amy opened it and sighed. Mom, there is no sale. June waited. No contract, Amy continued. No purchase agreement. This is feasibility work. You let them onto Blue Heron. Yes. To measure land I still control. Amy folded her arms. The camp needs capital. The dock is aging. The septic system needs work. Cabin 7 may not be worth renovating. None of us wants to be running a campground forever. The argument was reasonable. That made it harder. June nodded. You're right about the dock. Amy blinked. And the septic? Scott shifted in his chair. Then what are we fighting about? We're not fighting about property. June looked at each of them. I understand the property. She paused. What I don't understand is my children. No one answered. June tapped the packet. When were you planning to use this? Amy said. We were planning ahead. For when? Mom, for when? Scott leaned back. His voice was not cruel when he answered. When you're not here anymore. The room went quiet. There was something worse about how normally he said it. No threat, no hatred, just a business condition. June nodded once. Thank you. Scott frowned. For what? For saying the part everyone keeps hiding behind nicer words. I turned to Mark. Did you know developers had been here? He hesitated. I knew Amy wanted a valuation. Did you know Scott had the gate code? Yes. Did you know people were coming onto the property? I knew they might. And you said nothing. It wasn't official. Becca, that's not what I asked. His jaw tightened. There was no contract. Again, not what I asked. I was not angry because Mark might someday think selling Blue Heron made sense. I was angry because he had decided his mother did not need to know people were making plans around her property, and that his wife did not need to know either. Scott looked toward the folder June had brought back from Helen's office. So what did she get you to do? June's face hardened. Rebecca did not get me to do anything. Scott pointed at me. She drove you to the lawyer. Because none of my children came to pick me up. That's not fair. It is exactly what happened. Then Mark looked at me. For 1 second, I waited for him to defend me. Instead, he asked, What did Mom sign? Something inside me went very still. Scott's accusation hurt. Amy's secrecy hurt. But Mark's question was different. He had known me for 28 years. And when forced to choose between what he knew about me and what he feared might be true, he chose fear. That was the moment I understood the deepest wound in this family might not come from the people I trusted least. It might come from the man who should have known me best. Rumors did not appear on their own. I learned that over the next 2 weeks. They always had a first speaker, a first listener, and a first version of the story. By the time the story reached the 10th person, almost nobody remembered where it had started. Scott and Amy did not tell outright lies. That was what made it effective. Amy told a contact at a title company that June had just come out of rehabilitation, that I had picked her up, and that I had driven her directly to an estate lawyer. Scott told a contractor almost the same thing. Then both of them added the final fact. After that visit, June changed part of her trust. Every sentence was true. They simply left out the parts that changed the meaning. June had scheduled the appointment before I knew anything about North Shore Development Group. The Lawson Family Living Trust was already 9 years old, and the developer activity had started before I ever opened that manila envelope. A cousin heard one version. Someone in the Lake Association heard another. A contractor mentioned it to a business owner who knew one of my clients. The rumor did not spread through all of Traverse City like some dramatic small-town curse. It moved through the circles that mattered. That was enough. A half-truth did not need everyone to believe it. It only needed the right people to hesitate first. One Tuesday afternoon, a bookkeeping client called me. Becca, I hate to ask this. Then don't! He gave a nervous laugh. Our board heard there may be litigation involving you. There may be. Anything connected to client money? No. Your company? No. He paused. We're going to delay renewal until things are clearer. I had handled their payroll for 7 years. Okay, I'm sorry. So am I. 2 days later, another client called. I prepared myself for the same conversation. Instead, she said. I heard about your family. I closed my eyes. Okay. I don't care. I opened them again. Excuse me? Payroll is still due Friday. Your family can fight over whatever they want after you send me the reports. I laughed for the first time that week. The world was not divided into people who believed me and people who hated me. Some were suspicious, some were uncomfortable, some simply had work to do. At church, nobody threw me out or whispered prayers for my soul. A few conversations ended faster than usual. One woman who normally sat beside me chose another row. Others acted exactly the same. Donna Reyes found me after the service and handed me coffee. I don't know what June signed, she said. Good. I don't need to. I looked at her. Donna shrugged. I watched you help Frank for years when nobody was taking pictures. That tells me more than gossip does. I nearly cried into the coffee. Helen introduced me to Marcus Reed, a trust and estate litigator. Marcus was not theatrical. He did not promise to destroy anybody. He asked practical questions. Do you still have the emails? Yes. Texts? Yes. Voicemails? Some. Keep everything. Write down dates. Do not delete messages. Do not post about this online. Do not answer rumors with rumors. That sounds easy when you say it. It isn't. A few days later, I noticed a man photographing me while I spoke with Caleb near the Blue Heron office. He was parked across the access road. I did not walk over. I photographed his license plate, noted the time, and sent both to Marcus. He called that evening. Likely an investigator. For Scott? Possibly his attorney. They may be looking for evidence that you had some financial relationship with June or Blue Heron. I don't. Then let them discover that. Marcus told me to keep any cancellation emails and document any specific false statements that caused business harm. If Scott or Amy crossed from opinion into provably false accusations, he said, a preservation or cease and desist letter might become appropriate. He never said lawsuit first. That helped me trust him. At home, Mark and I stopped arguing. That was worse. He slept in the guest room. We discussed the dishwasher, the dog's medication, utility bills, and groceries. 28 years of marriage had become household administration. One night, I found him standing alone on the back deck. Do you actually believe I manipulated your mother? He stared into the yard. I don't know what happened in Helen's office. That wasn't my question. He looked at me. What are you asking? I'm asking what you know about me. Mark said nothing. I nodded. Sometimes silence is not the absence of an answer. It is the answer. 3 nights later, June called. Come to Blue Heron tomorrow. Why? I found something Frank left behind. My stomach tightened. What? Not money, she said. Not another will. I waited. June's voice softened. An old wall calendar. The calendar was buried beneath 2 boxes of old tax records in the back office at Blue Heron. It was 14 years old, the year Frank's health had begun to decline. June set it on the desk between us. He used to write everything down, she said. I opened to March. Several dates had single letters written in blue ink. S, A, M, R. I understood slowly. Scott, Amy, Mark, and me? June nodded. Frank kept track of who came by. I turned the page. April, R on Tuesday, R on Thursday, M on Saturday, R again the following Tuesday. May was the same. There were letters for everyone, but mine appeared with a regularity I had forgotten. Not only after hospital visits, after ordinary appointments, after family dinners, on weekends when everyone else had already gone home. I felt embarrassed looking at it. I don't remember being here this much. Neither do I. June said. I looked up. She ran one finger along the edge of the calendar. That bothers me. Why? Because the things that happen most often are the things people stop seeing. The sentence landed harder than praise would have. June remembered Scott paying an unexpected medical bill. She remembered Amy flying in for Memorial Day weekend. She remembered Mark driving Frank to a cardiology appointment during a snowstorm. Those moments stood out because they were unusual. My visits had become background. I kept turning pages until November. At the bottom of one square, Frank had written a short note. R stayed after everyone left. That was all. No speech. No declaration that I was better than his children. Just one line in fading blue ink. I closed the calendar. June, if this is why you chose me as trustee, I don't want it. Her eyebrows rose. You think I'm handing governance of a $7 million property to someone because she washed dishes? I'm serious. So am I. She pulled the calendar toward herself. Caregiving is not currency. Becca, you don't earn control of someone's estate by being helpful. I relaxed slightly. Then why me? Because you understand numbers. There are accountants everywhere. You respect systems, so do plenty of people. You tell me bad news even when I don't want to hear it. I thought of the summer I had told her Blue Heron's cabin rates were too low. June had accused me of wanting to turn the place into a resort. I had shown her maintenance costs, insurance increases, and occupancy numbers. We argued for 2 weeks. Eventually, she raised rates 8%. No guests revolted. Blue Heron survived another season without borrowing from reserves. June continued. You hire experts when you don't know something. You don't confuse sentiment with competence. And you've disagreed with me without trying to punish me for saying no. She tapped the calendar. This tells me who you were before anyone thought there was something to gain. Then she opened a folder I had not noticed. Inside was another email chain. 3 months before her rehabilitation stay, Scott had written to Mark and Amy, Mom will never agree to sell while she's alive. Mark replied, Then don't pressure her. Amy answered minutes later, We don't need to. We just need everything ready. There was no response from Mark after that. I read it twice. He saw this? Yes. He knew what they meant? I believe so. June's voice remained careful. I do not believe my son wanted me dead. Neither do I. But he knew they were turning after Mom dies into a business milestone. I folded the email and took it home. Mark was in the kitchen. I placed it on the counter. His face changed before he finished reading. I can explain. Please do. I thought it was ugly, not illegal. I never asked if it was illegal. He looked away. I told them not to pressure her. And when Amy said they didn't need to because they could prepare everything in advance, he said nothing. That's what I'm asking about. Mark pulled out a chair. You know how Scott is. Yes. And Amy can talk circles around anyone. Yes. My dad hated conflict, or maybe he hated losing it. Growing up, the easiest way to survive was to stay out of the middle. I sat across from him. You're not 12 anymore. His face tightened. I know. No, Mark. You learned to call avoidance peace because it kept you safe. But when you're an adult, silence still affects people. 2 days later, June developed chest pain. At the hospital, Scott arrived furious and frightened. When he saw me, fear found a target. If something happens to Mom, this is on you. Before I could answer, Mark stepped between us. No. Scott stared at him. Mark's voice shook, but he did not move. Don't put that on her. It was not forgiveness. It was not repair. But after months of watching him avoid every line in the sand, I watched my husband finally choose one. For the first time, he accepted that staying neutral was also a choice. June did not die that week. The doctors kept her overnight, adjusted 2 medications, and told us the chest pain had been caused by dehydration, stress, and an underlying heart condition that now needed closer monitoring. 3 days later, she was back at Blue Heron. She moved more slowly. She did not surrender control at home. She followed the cardiologist's instructions, used her walker when she was tired, and let Caleb carry heavier boxes. But she still signed checks, approved repairs, and reminded everyone that needing help with her body had not taken away her judgment. The following Saturday, June called another family meeting at the lodge. This one was entirely her idea. Helen Brooks sat at the end of the table, not as referee, but so no one could later pretend they had misunderstood the legal structure. June looked at Scott, Mark, Amy, and then me. I changed the successor trustee. Scott leaned back. To Rebecca. Yes, Amy exhaled sharply. After surgery, after 9 years of watching, June opened a folder. Let's make one thing clear before anybody tells this story badly. Scott, Mark, and Amy remain equal beneficiaries of the trust. Scott frowned. And Rebecca is not a beneficiary. That stopped him. June continued. If Rebecca accepts the trustee role when the time comes, she may receive reasonable trustee compensation. She may also waive it. If she refuses, an independent professional fiduciary takes over. So she doesn't control everything? Amy asked. No one controls everything. Helen added that the trustee would remain bound by the trust terms, fiduciary duties, reporting requirements, and professional review provisions. June nodded. And Blue Heron does not have to stay exactly as it is. She listed the options herself. Parts of the property could be leased, cabins could be renovated, unprofitable sections could be closed. And if an independent assessment eventually showed that selling served the trust better than continued operation, the property could be sold. Scott looked at her. Then why not let us make that decision? We're your children. Because being my children makes you beneficiaries. June paused. It does not automatically make you good fiduciaries. Scott's jaw tightened. So an outsider gets to decide what happens to family property? June looked at me, then back at him. Not an outsider, a fiduciary. That's semantics. No, it's accountability. Her voice remained level. Family feelings are exactly why I want someone who has to document the decision instead of just defending it. Amy turned toward me. You always wanted Mom to see you as the daughter she never had. I felt the old temptation to explain myself. I let it pass. I never wanted your place. Amy, she looked away. I wanted you to call your mother while she was still here to answer. Nothing I could have added would have improved that sentence. After the meeting, June asked Mark to stay. I left. He told me later that they sat on the dock for almost an hour. He did not repeat everything, only one question. June had asked him, when did being neutral become more important to you than being honest? Mark said he had no answer. A week later, Helen recorded an estate planning video with June. I was not in the room. In the recording, June stated the date, named her children, identified Blue Heron and the trust, and explained what the amendment changed. She understood that replacing her children as successor co-trustees affected control, not their equal beneficial interests. She said I had never asked her to change anything. She described the developer activity and why it concerned her. Then Helen asked why she had chosen me. June answered, because Rebecca knows the difference between caring for something and owning it. After that, June lived 4 more months. not waited, lived. She went to physical therapy. She returned to the camp office. She argued with Caleb about lumber costs. She reviewed spring reservations. She rejected one contractor's estimate and requested another. She called Scott twice, Amy once, Mark almost every week. Nothing became perfect, but nothing froze either. In late February, Caleb found June at home after she failed to open the office at her usual time. She had died from a cardiac event. There was no final speech, no last-minute confession. On the table sat a cold cup of coffee, an open reservation ledger, and a postcard from a family who had spent 12 summers at Blue Heron. That ordinary scene hurt more than anything dramatic could have. At the funeral, Scott cried openly. Amy held his hand. Mark sat with his head bowed through most of the service. I did not look at them and see villains. I saw 3 children who had made choices that hurt their mother and still loved her. Those truths could exist together. 3 weeks later, a process server came to my house. Scott and Amy had filed a petition contesting the trust amendment. Mark's name was not on it. I looked at him across our kitchen table. He had not joined them, but he had not chosen me either, not yet. Marcus Reed explained the case to me 2 days before the hearing. The court is not deciding who loved June most, he said. Good. It is not deciding who behaved best. Even better. He folded his hands. We have 3 questions. Did June have capacity? Did she understand the amendment? And did you exercise undue influence over her decision? That was all. Scott and Amy's story sounded reasonable when reduced to a few facts. An 80-year-old woman had just left rehabilitation. Her daughter-in-law picked her up. Instead of taking her home, the daughter-in-law drove her to an estate lawyer. Soon afterward, that same daughter-in-law was named successor trustee. Marcus did not pretend those facts looked harmless. If that were everything I knew, he said, I would ask questions too. The courtroom itself was quieter than I expected. No dramatic objections every few minutes. No jury. No reporters rushing toward the doors. Mostly folders, exhibits, careful questions, and long pauses while the judge read. It felt less like television and more like accounting. Claims on one side, records on the other. The hearing began with the original trust, 9 years old. Blue Heron had already been titled in it for nearly a decade. I had not created the trust, transferred the land, or received any beneficial interest. The amendment changed governance, not ownership, not the beneficiaries. That removed the simplest version of the accusation, that I had taken a vulnerable woman to a lawyer and created an estate plan for myself. Next came June's medical records. The rehabilitation center documented that she was oriented, managed her own treatment decisions, understood discharge instructions, and showed no signs of dementia or delirium. Her hip surgery affected how she walked. It did not explain away her judgment. Then Helen testified. Marcus asked the questions. Helen answered them. She explained that June had contacted her before the discharge day, that she met with June privately, and that I had not been present when June gave instructions. She had asked June about the amendment on separate occasions. June's answers remained consistent. 2 independent witnesses observed the signing. Then the video was played. It was not a farewell message. June was alive, alert, wearing a blue cardigan, and annoyed that Helen made her repeat the date. She identified Blue Heron, named all 3 children, explained the trust, and described exactly what the amendment changed. Helen asked, Did Rebecca ask you to replace your children as successor trustees? No. Did anyone pressure you? No. Do you understand that Rebecca will not become a beneficiary? Yes. And why are you making this change? June described the developer visits. Then she said, I want decisions made because they are responsible, not because everyone is waiting for me to die. The next evidence came from discovery. There were preliminary site plans, valuation materials, access notes, emails, and a draft letter of intent that depended on whoever eventually had legal authority to sell. Nothing proved an illegal sale. That was not the point. The dates did. The planning had begun before my drive from rehabilitation, before Helen's amendment. Before I knew North Shore Development Group existed, I could not have created a concern June already had. Then Mark testified. Scott and Amy's lawyer went first. Your wife refused to tell you what happened in Helen Brooks's office, correct? Yes. You were angry? Yes. You questioned whether she influenced your mother? Mark looked toward me. Yes. That answer hurt, even though I already knew it. Then Marcus stood. Mr. Lawson, did you know your siblings were exploring development options before June's discharge? Yes. Did Rebecca know? No. Did you tell her? No. Did you tell your mother? No. Why not? Mark took a long breath. I did not want another family fight. Marcus paused. Was your wife's silence the same as yours? No. Explain. Mark looked down at his hands. Rebecca was protecting Mom's confidence. He swallowed. I was protecting myself from conflict. He did not blame Scott. He did not blame Amy. For once, he did not call avoidance neutrality. The final piece was Frank's calendar. Marcus did not present it as proof of June's capacity or as some magical answer to the case. It served a narrower purpose. Scott and Amy had suggested I built dependence over time because I wanted control of Blue Heron. The calendar showed I had been helping Frank 14 years earlier, when there was no amendment, no developer, and nothing for me to gain. One line appeared in Frank's handwriting. R stayed after everyone left. Nobody applauded. The judge did not give a speech. The hearing ended, and we waited. 3 weeks later, Marcus called while I was processing payroll. The written ruling came in. I stopped typing. And the amendment stands. The judge found June had capacity, received independent legal advice, expressed consistent intent, and was not shown to have acted under my undue influence. The developer planning gave her a rational reason to reconsider who should control future decisions. I expected relief to feel bigger. Instead, I felt tired, Marcus continued. There is one more thing. What? June left an instruction Helen was not permitted to discuss while the litigation was pending. I sat back. About money? No. Then what? Marcus paused. About you. Marcus and Helen met me in the same conference room where June had changed the trust months earlier. This time, there was no camera, no witnesses, and no argument waiting outside the door. Helen placed a binder in front of me. This is the instruction June wanted held until the litigation ended. I opened it slowly. There was no deed transferring Blue Heron to me, no cabin, no lakefront parcel, no cash gift hidden behind a legal phrase. Nothing that resembled the inheritance Scott and Amy had accused me of chasing. My name appeared only beside one title, Successor Trustee. I looked at Helen. That's it? That's it. If I say no, the independent trust company takes over. I sat back. For months, people had spoken as if June had handed me a fortune. What she had actually handed me was responsibility, and even that came with an exit. Helen tapped the next section. June was very specific about the first 3 years. The trustee had to commission professional reviews of Blue Heron's operations, engineering needs, septic system, dock, cabin condition, insurance exposure, revenue, and maintenance reserves. A professional campground manager had to be hired. The trustee was not expected to become an expert by pretending. I almost laughed. That sounds like June. Marcus turned another page. One sentence had been underlined. Sentimental value alone shall not be sufficient reason to preserve an economically non-viable asset. I read it twice. June had loved Blue Heron. She had spent most of her adult life there. Frank's hands had built part of the lodge. Their children had grown up beside the lake. And still, she had refused to turn memory into a command. If the professional review eventually showed that selling Blue Heron served the trust better than keeping it, the property could be sold. That was the part Scott had never understood about her decision. June had not chosen me because I would save Blue Heron at any cost. She had chosen a process she believed would make the decision for the right reasons. Not greed, not guilt, not entitlement, responsibility. I did not accept that day. I spent a week asking questions. I met with my CPA. I spoke with Marcus again. I hired a campground consultant for 2 hours just to explain what I did not know. And I talked to Mark. For once, he did not tell me what would keep the family calm, he asked. What do you want? I don't know yet. He nodded. Okay. That answer helped more than advice would have. On the 8th day, I accepted. Not because June had chosen me, because she had trusted me enough to let me refuse. Scott's life did not collapse. His construction company restructured some debt and kept operating. A few business relationships cooled after the dispute became public, but there was no dramatic bankruptcy. Amy kept her real estate license and continued working. Some referrals around the lake community slowed, and North Shore Development Group quietly walked away from further discussions about Blue Heron. Neither of them lost everything. I was glad. June had not wanted revenge. She had wanted consequences to remain attached to choices instead of becoming another family mythology. Mark moved into a small apartment for a while. I did not throw him out. He suggested it. We keep acting normal because the house makes it easy, he said. Maybe we need to stop doing that. So we did. We still spoke. We still handled bills. We went to counseling separately before we ever went together. There was no sudden reconciliation. One evening, a few weeks after I accepted the trustee role, Mark came to the house and stood on the porch. Can I come home? I looked at him for a long moment. Do you want me back? I asked. Or do you just want the consequences to stop? His face changed. A year earlier, he might have reached for the answer most likely to keep me from being angry. This time, he looked down. I don't know yet. Strangely, that hurt less than a beautiful lie would have. I nodded. Then figure that out first. He did not argue. He did not ask how long. He only said, okay. After he left, I stood by the door and thought about June. For the first time, I understood being trusted did not mean surrendering the right to choose. She had not left me Blue Heron. She had left me something harder, a responsibility I could decline, a marriage I did not have to restore, and the uncomfortable freedom to decide what deserved to be carried forward and what needed to be released. 18 months later, Blue Heron was still there. It had not become a luxury resort. We had not doubled revenue, appeared in travel magazines, or discovered some hidden fortune. We hired a professional general manager. Because June had been right, responsibility did not mean pretending to know what I did not know. 3 cabins were closed because repairs no longer made financial sense. 1 was torn down. The septic system was upgraded in phases. Online booking replaced the handwritten reservation calendar. Rates increased modestly. The first year produced a small profit. Nothing miraculous. Every quarter, Scott, Mark, and Amy received the same report: revenue, expenses, repairs, reserves, distributions. I wanted the numbers boring enough that nobody could build another family story around what I was supposedly hiding. Scott still believed selling Blue Heron would produce more money. He might have been right. Amy still said, "Dad would hate this new booking system." Sometimes I answered, "Probably." I no longer needed every disagreement to have a villain. That fall, Blue Heron partnered with a local nonprofit for one weekend. We set aside several cabins for family caregivers, people who had spent years arranging medications, appointments, meals, transportation, and everyone else's emergencies. There was no foundation, no fundraiser, no sign with June's name, just tired people getting 2 days in which nobody needed them to organize anything. I understood that better than I wished I did. A month later, Caleb retired. Before leaving, he handed me the keypad instructions. "Who needs the new gate code?" I looked at the list: manager, maintenance, emergency contacts, scheduled vendors. I did not write Lawson family. Scott could receive access for a trust meeting. Amy could receive it when she had a reason to be there. Mark could too. A last name was not an access credential. That was not punishment. It was structure. Mark and I had been in counseling for almost a year. I did not become a different man overnight. He simply stopped using both sides whenever honesty might make someone angry. He stopped carrying messages between me and his siblings. He stopped asking when I would forgive him. When he disagreed, he said so. When consequences lasted longer than he wanted, he learned not to treat that as cruelty. One Thursday after dinner, he asked, "Do you think we'll ever be what we were?" I looked at him. "I hope not." His face tightened. "What we were is part of how we got here." He was quiet. "So what do you want?" "Maybe something more honest?" He nodded. There was no promise after that, no certainty, just work. Near the end of October, Blue Heron hosted an autumn gathering. Local families carved pumpkins, ate soup in the lodge, and listened to a high school acoustic group near the fireplace. By 7, almost everyone had gone home. I stayed folding tables, collecting paper cups, and tying trash bags. Mark had already left. Then the lodge door opened. He walked back in. "Forget something?" I asked. "No." He pulled a trash bag from beneath the counter. "What still needs doing?" I looked past him into the office. Frank's old calendar still hung there, held by 2 clips. One faded line remained visible. R stayed after everyone left. I handed Mark another bag. "Tables and back." "Okay." We cleaned without talking. I once thought family loyalty meant staying no matter what. June taught me otherwise. Forgiveness does not automatically restore access. Loving a place does not mean preserving it forever. Justice does not require destroying the people who hurt you. Blood creates a relationship, but it does not automatically create trust, control, or entitlement. Character is often clearest after the argument ends, after the funeral, after the courtroom, after everyone stops watching. Frank told me to notice who stayed after everyone went home. It took me years to understand he was never really talking about cleanup. If someone once stayed beside you after everyone else left, tell me about them in the comments. And if you were in my place, would you have accepted responsibility for Blue Heron or handed it to a professional trustee? If you value stories about family, boundaries, second chances, and justice without destruction. Subscribe and join me for the next one.